Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon, Australia. So here we have with Clint Warren-Davey. So we are going to have a presentation about 1 hour following his title of one series. If you know something about Clint, he's a historian teacher in Australia, war games designer, developer. He focuses on strategic operational war games, but he's also very good, in just picking like a small things in games. So he's really, really good. He presents games, in classes. So he's in the military historian, in the defense college in Canberra. But he's not only working on one game, so he has about 7 games around. Yeah. It's not more, currently. So we may know Werewolf from Legion War Games. You know the series 1 Hour World War II, which is the most recent published. 1 Hour Napoleon, which is upcoming, so I haven't been playtesting it. 1 Hour World War I. There is a rumor that it's a 1 hour 30 Years War.
Eventually, yeah.
Eventually, there's Division Commander 101 S Airborne by Ditch Foundation. Course Soldiers by Phalanx. Gallipoli from Ditch Foundation. So he's really busy, but he's very active. And he's not person it's not only active, but he's really good on commenting things. And I've been following him personally on Twitter, which is now X. We even present both of ourselves with George University Wargaming Society. And he presented 1 week or 2 before myself. And he made a very short presentation about simplifying wargames. And I think it was 45 minutes. He has been even helping me myself with the cards development. So we have a pleasure to have someone from the other side of the world. So we see that this convention is worldwide. So the stage is yours. If someone has any question, feel free to comment it. Just post it on the chat on the bubble that you see. If you want to comment on Spanish, no worries, because I will translate it. But the stage is yours, Clint.
Right. Thank you, Daniel. I will just be talking in English because I don't speak Spanish. Sorry, guys. Yeah, as Daniel said, this is me. I'm a history teacher, war game designer. I've done some work with the Defence College in our capital city of Canberra, so I do some work with the military, but most of what I do is teaching history in the classroom and making war games. So I've got a number of games in development at the moment. So I've one that's going to be released next year called Werewolf, about Nazi insurgents in occupied Germany. I've got another game coming out about the 101st Airborne Division. I've got another one coming out about the Polish insurgency in World War II and in the post-war period. I've got another game on Gallipoli. But what I'm going to be talking about today is this. So hopefully everyone can see my presentation up on the screen here. I'm going to be talking today only about the 1 hour series of war games, which I am working on right now. So this is through Worthington Games. Daniel himself has already helped me with some playtesting for this series. He's helped me out with 1 Hour Napoleon. I've got some people all around the world who've helped with playtesting all of these. The one that's actually been released and published is a finished game is 1 Hour World War II. So that is available to buy now from Worthington. And then the 2 other games that are just in development right now is 1 Hour World War I and 1 Hour Napoleon. So I'm going to be talking about this series of games, basically how I've made them, and where I'm up to with the development of these other 2 titles. So here's a picture of 1 Hour World War II, just the box art. This is the front and back of the box. So this is one that, like I said, that you can currently buy. I'll be talking a lot about this 1 Hour World War II. But I'm also going to show you 2 other 1 hour games that I have in development. And obviously the title is indicative of the playtime. The main selling point of these games is that they are played in 1 hour. So 1 Hour World War II is a finished product, but there's 2 other games in development. Here is just an example of the setup for 1 Hour Napoleon. So this is the one I've been working on a lot lately, and I'm planning on having this released early 2025. This is just playtest graphics, so the final graphics will be much nicer than this. This is just a very, very basic map that I put together in PowerPoint. But if you look at the map, this will give you an idea of the scale that I'm operating at with the 1 hour series. So this game, 1 Hour Napoleon, is meant to be covering the Napoleonic Wars from 1805 to 1815, so 10 years of warfare in 1 hour.
I think we
This has
don't
been-
see the screen, Clint. Sorry to interrupt them. I think if you are not moving the PowerPoint.
Yeah, I'm going. Can you see this? What can you guys see? Hold on.
Oh, okay, now I got it. Now we see that. Okay.
You can see it? Okay, hold on. Can you see this? Can you see 1 Hour Napoleon map?
Perfect.
Yep.
Thanks.
Okay. That's all right. So hopefully that's working. So yeah, this is 1 Hour Napoleon. This is 1 Hour World War One. Can you guys see that, Daniel?
Yeah, perfect.
Yep. 1 hour. Okay, perfect. So if you just look at the scale of the map and how many spaces are on the map, and how many pieces are on there, this gives you an idea of the scale that these games are operating at. So they're meant to be played in an hour. A lot of things have to be abstracted out and simplified, but I want to get to the core decisions of the historical countries in these conflicts. So what I'm going to do is just take you through how I design these games and why I make them. So why have I made the 1 hour series? Basically because I don't have much time. A lot of us gamers don't have much time. And this is whether we're talking military, so military wargaming, which I do some of, educational wargaming, so in a high school setting or a university setting, or just us playing games for fun. All of us have less time. So if you make a shorter game, it's going to get played more. It's going to have a larger audience. It's easier to teach. And in my design philosophy, I think the most important thing about a game is the number of meaningful decisions across the time of the game. The number of meaningful decisions. Games are about making decisions. So what I do with the 1 hour series is I strip down a historical conflict into the core meaningful decisions for that time period. That's what it's focused on. And I strip away a lot of the other complexity around the time period. All right, so they are very, very simple games relative to what we wargamers are used to. And so some things have to be cut, but the things I want to focus on are the core decision making. So how I make these games, this is what I'm going to take you through now. When I make a game in the 1 hour series, this is the sequence that I go through. So I make a map, I decide the unit scale, I decide the play time, I come up with some kind of basic combat system, and then I just test over and over again. So, first of all, how I make the maps. Right here on the screen, you should be able to see the map for 1 Hour World War II. And what I do with these maps is I try and make them as few spaces as possible while still covering the strategic dimensions of the conflict. So this map for 1 Hour World War II has gone through a lot of revisions and a lot of versions, but mostly it's what I originally started with. It has 31 spaces. That includes land and sea. And to give you an idea of the level of abstraction we're talking about here, if you look at the Soviet Union, for example, on this map, I've condensed the entire Soviet Union, largest country in the world at the time, down to 5 spaces. Moscow, Leningrad, Ukraine, Stalingrad, and Siberia. And you'll notice these are not of a consistent scale. These are just they're general areas. So you could read it as Stalingrad representing the entire Caucasus, for example, and Leningrad being all of northern Russia. But they're also the key strategic nodes on that map. Similarly, if you look at the Pacific Ocean, I condensed that down to just 3 sea zones, so North Pacific, East Pacific, South Pacific. And if you look at Europe, you've got France, Italy, Germany, Poland, the Balkans. Basically, that's it. So a lot of condensing has taken place to get this map down to 31 spaces. You know, I could have made this map 10 times the number of spaces. I could have really zoomed in and I could have had Belgium and Holland, and I could have had Hungary, I could have had, Sweden, Norway, Denmark. But at this level, and for this play time, a lot of things need to be cut, and that includes the map. So what I do with each game in the series is I start with the smallest possible map that will still capture the key strategic level decisions. Okay? I'll come back to that in a moment, but I'll go through the rest of the process. Once I've made my map, which we'll always go through several versions, but once I've made my map, I make the units for the game. Now, what you should be seeing on your screen there is the total unit counters for 1 hour World War II. This is every single unit in the game from all of the major nations. So there are 58 units in total for 1 hour World War II. 31 spaces on the map, 58 units for all nations combined. That includes land and sea. Aircraft are totally abstracted. I don't have aircraft pieces on the map. They are abstracted on the nation sheet. They just basically come into a combat bonus. And if you look at these, it'll give you an idea of the scale. Now, when I decide the unit scale from the game, the first decision I have to make is what is the smallest unit that I'm going to represent? What's the smallest unit? And we start from there. And you'll see on here, the entire Italian army is one piece. So you should be able to see that there with the little Italian flag. Likewise, the entire Italian navy is one piece. The French army is one piece. Chinese army is two pieces. Now, this has got nothing to do with the actual number of troops. It's not like one piece represents 1 million men or 500,000 men or whatever. These are just abstract units. You can see them as just an abstraction of combat strength. So I start with the small things. The Italian army is one piece. Right? So if the Italian army is one piece, how many pieces are the Germans going to have? And you'll see they obviously have a lot more. The Germans have a total of 9 army pieces. 2 of them are the Panzers. They're the tank units. They're level 2. But
sorry,
again,
Clint, I'm sorry to interrupt. We see like only the screen with the 1 hour Napoleon, not the 1 hour World War II.
Oh, okay. I don't know why that's happening. Sorry. Can you see it now?
Yes.
Yep. Can you see it now?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Sorry. I don't know why it's not changing slides. But yeah, hopefully everyone can see that. Ooh, let me just go back. So can you still see the units there?
Yes.
Okay. So yeah, this is the whole counter sheet for 1 hour World War II. So you'll see here, the German army is 9 pieces, right? 9 army units. Likewise, if I go for ships, like go for the naval strength, the Japanese fleet is 4 pieces. The UK fleet is also 4 pieces, and the American fleet is 6 pieces. Right? German fleet is just 2. Soviet fleet is 1. They're highly, highly abstract. Now, if you want to think of these units in terms of something resembling real life, you could imagine each piece as a very, very strong army group. For example, when the Germans invaded the Soviet Union in June of 1941 in Operation Barbarossa, they had 3 army groups, North, Centre, and South. In 1 hour World War II, this would be represented as 3 pieces, right? 3 army pieces. So you could imagine each army is an army group, something like that. But, of course, it's very abstract. It doesn't always mean that. For example, the fighting in the Pacific, if you have a Japanese army in the Philippines or in India, that does not represent an army group on the same scale as the Eastern Front, but it's just an abstract measure of force. Okay, so in 1 hour World War II, we have 31 spaces on the map and 58 units. Next, so hopefully this will actually work. Then I decide on the play time, which is, of course, 1 hour, but how do we do that? How this system works is I break down the conflict into just a series of actions, of discrete actions. So an action might be an offensive, moving armies from one space to another. Or it might be building an army, or it might be moving a fleet or whatever. So I break down the war into a series of actions. And to keep within the time frame, I keep those actions very, very simple so that they can be physically resolved on the map in about 30 to 45 seconds, maybe a minute. And then that allows me to stick to the time frame of 60 minutes, right, for 1 hour. So if each action is 30 to 45 seconds to resolve, I go, right, all of World War II, I have to condense it down to somewhere in the area of 80 to 90 actions. In a game of 1 hour World War II, you are going to be doing somewhere between 80 and 87 discrete actions. That's for all the countries put together. Now, how that breaks down is very different depending on the nation you're talking about. For example, Japan, as a relatively minor nation compared to the US or Germany, for example, Japan will probably make a total of 12 actions in the entire game, right? 6 turns, 2 actions per turn, right? That's Japan. America, the USA, will probably take around 20 actions over the course of the game. So that gives you an idea. And the actions are roughly a representation of the economy and the command structure of each nation. So the USA is a big country with a lot of resources, an economic powerhouse, an industrial powerhouse. So it gets more actions. It means it can do more stuff on the map, right? It can perform more actions. Whereas a smaller country, like say you're playing as the United Kingdom in 1940, you're just going to get 2 actions in that year. You'll build up a little bit later in the game, but for the most part, you're stuck with those 2 actions. You can't do as much. So instead of having an economic system where I keep track of money or production points or anything like that, it's just the number of actions your country can do reflects its economic strength. Okay? So a bigger, more powerful country can simply do more actions. And then when you add all those actions up, like I said, up to 87 actions in a game of 1 hour World War II, each action taking you 30 to 45 seconds. That's how I keep the time frame down to 60 minutes. And how those actions play out is a series of action and response. So you do an action, like say it's build, offensive, strategic move, or upgrade. These are very simple actions. They're actually very similar to what you might find in like an engine building Euro game. And then once you've done an action, other countries can jump in and do a response, which you'll see. Hopefully you can see these 2 nation sheets, Soviet Union and Germany, the sheets that show the players what they can do, action and response. So you do an action and then other countries can jump in if they wish and spend an action to do a response, which is basically a different type of action that will disrupt what you're doing or maybe help you if it's one of the countries on your own side. All right, let me just see. Next is the combat system. So hopefully this works. So how I design my combat system is it has to be as quick as possible to resolve combats. I always, in all of my designs, I avoid any charts. So I don't have combat resolution tables. I don't have any charts where you have to look at a column and a row and find a required dice roll or anything like that. Usually the combat systems in my games are just add up a couple of numbers. So I'm attacking you. I'm attacking you 3 level 1 armies. My strength is 3. And then I could commit reserves to boost that up. Right? I could commit reserves from my nation sheet, which is off the map. That represents my economy or my the pipeline of units going from the home country to the front line. You know, that cycle of reserves heading to the front line, that's represented on your own sheet, not on the map. You can commit reserves to boost your score. So the battles are going to come down to, numbers that are usually less than 10 and in fact usually less than 5. I attack you, I have a level 2 army, you have a level 1 army. Maybe you commit 2 level 1 reserves that boost your score to 3 so you win. Now the key thing about this is it's very quick to resolve. It's very simple to resolve. It doesn't require the players looking up any charts or having to do any calculations. No division, no multiplication, nothing. But it still involves decision making. They are still making a decision over the commitment of reserves, which is, in my opinion, the key factor in any time period you're looking at. You're looking at the level of a general in charge of armies, or even a general, say, if you're looking at divisions, corps, armies, army groups, that scale of military operations, the key decision for any general is when to commit reserves or if you're going to commit reserves and where you're going to commit them, right? The commitment of reserves is the key decision point in operational level combat. So that's some people may disagree with that, but that's certainly been my point of view. Is there someone chiming in with a question there? No. So combat system, very, very simple. Just focus on adding up the numbers, and if you want to boost your score, you commit reserves. Right? So that's how that works. And then playtesting. So once I've made my map, I've decided my unit scale, decided the number of actions, decided playtime, I've just got my combat system, then I need to playtest. Now what I'm showing you here is just a little screenshot from my USB on my computer. This is just all the PowerPoint files that I use to playtest. I do all my playtesting in PowerPoint, so I don't print anything. And some people who are wargame designers might be surprised at this. I mean, I don't use Vassal, I don't use Tabletop Simulator most of the time. I just do everything in PowerPoint because I know how to use it. I've been using it for 20 years. I know how PowerPoint works. I can move objects around, copy and paste. I can manipulate objects on the screen very, very easily. So I get everything into PowerPoint, and I can very quickly set up games, and it's quick to reset. I just save a standard playtest file, and then I can just keep uploading that and playing multiple games. And my general rule is, if you're a wargame designer, before you even show your game to a publisher, or even if you show it to external playtesters, I really think you should have tested it at least 20 times already. So I talk to people who are aspiring wargame designers all the time on Twitter and in real life. And this is my most important bit of advice: is you need to do a ton of testing. Like I said, minimum 20 times before you even tell anyone else about the game. Now you'll see here, 1 Hour Napoleon. I can't even fit it all on the screen. 1 Hour Napoleon I've tested about 25 times. 1 Hour World War I I've play tested about 31 times, as you can see on that screenshot. And I'm going to keep testing them. They've already been approved for publication. So Worthington Games have said to me, yeah, we're going to publish these games, but I'm going to keep testing them until I know they are just right. Especially with a system like this where there's very little randomness. There's actually no randomness most of the time when you play 1 Hour World War II, playing the standard rules, or how I prefer to play. There's very little randomness. So the game has to be very, very tightly balanced. So you need to test it over and over and over again. You have to try lots of different strategies to see if the game is...
Sorry, just one moment. Just muted yourself, please, in the presentation. Thanks. Sorry, you can continue, Clint.
Yeah, that's okay. So yeah, that's my number one bit of advice if you are a wargame designer, is you need to do a ton of playtesting, and even more playtesting if you're doing a game like this where there is it's almost like chess. It's like a game of chess. There's no dice rolling, there's no randomness. Every decision you make is affecting the state of the board in a very direct way, in a very deterministic way. So the balance has to be very, very fine-tuned, because it can be quite easy to find, a very easy game-winning strategy, and that's how you have to tweak the setup, or you have to tweak the rules slightly. But you need to do a ton of playtesting. So that's my rule: minimum 20 times before I send it. And that's the case with 1 Hour World War II. I tested that 20 times, and then I sent it off to a number of publishers. A lot of publishers wanted it, but Worthington gave me the best deal, so I went with them. And they're also very fast.
There is a question in the chat. Do you have a bot to play solitaire?
No, not at the moment, because it's very, very hard to make a bot for these kind of games. It's very hard to do. It would be like making a bot for a game like chess, which I know they exist. There's digital ones, but I don't have the skill to do it digitally. Making a solo version, I will do it eventually, but it's just a lot of work to get the balance right. And I don't want to make a game where, there's lots of ways of doing solo rules in games. One way you can do it is you can make it artificially hard for the player to compensate for the fact that the bots are not very smart. Okay, so what I mean by that is, if you can have very simple solitaire rules, the bots are playing kind of dumb. They're not because it's very hard to get a bot to go through a decision tree that's going to get to a good decision. You can just make it very simple. You make the bots do very, very basic actions, and then give the player a higher victory point threshold to reach, or something like that. That's like a way of making it artificially hard for the player, but not making the AI or the bots actually smart or good at the game. I would rather do it so that the bot you're playing against, again, it's not digital, talking like written rules. I would rather make it so that the bot you're playing against is actually a good player at the game. It's very, very hard to do in practice. So for the time being, there is no solo component to the game. But it is very easy to do solo. If you just do what I call multi-handed solo, where you pretend to be both sides, it's very easy to do because there's no hidden information. Everything's public. You can see everything on the board. So it's quite easy to just pretend to be multiple players and play the game like that. That's how I do it. Most of my playtest games are solo. That's the process that I go through. So I know I've gone through that reasonably quickly because I wanted to save some time for questions, but I might just go back and just give everyone a bit of a longer look at 1 Hour Napoleon. Daniel, can everyone see that again, the 1 Hour Napoleon map?
Yes, perfect.
Yeah, perfect. Okay. Thought I'd spend a bit more time just going back on this one because this is the one that Daniel has helped me playtest, and this is the one that I want to release next. Now, 1 Hour Napoleon has been one of the most challenging games I've ever made because the Napoleonic Wars from 1805 to 1815 go through so many changes in the diplomatic alignments of countries. So, for example, at the start of the war in 1805, you have Britain and Austria and Russia fighting against France and Spain. And then a year later, the Austrians have signed a peace treaty, but the Prussians have come in. A year later, the Prussians and the Russians have signed a peace treaty. And then the year after that, the Spanish have turned on Napoleon, the Spanish are leading an insurgency, and so on. So there's a constant change in which side the various countries are on. So this game is it is a war game. It's mostly about fighting, but there's also a huge element of diplomacy to it. And the diplomacy is basically getting these countries to change sides. And I had to condense a lot of things down for this. I've condensed the whole time frame into 6 turns. Right? Rather than having one turn being 1 year, I've just condensed it down to 6 general time periods, which you could roughly see as like 1805, 1806 to 1807, 1808 to 1811, 1812, 1813, and 1814. But within that, you can have huge swings in the diplomatic alignment. So you can have a country can join the war and then leave the war in the same turn, which did happen. You did have occasions like that in the Napoleonic Wars. So balancing that diplomacy system has been a big challenge, but I think I'm just about there with it. The combat system in 1 Hour Napoleon as well is quite different to 1 Hour World War II. It does depend on dice, and this is one of the few games I've made where I do use a dice-based combat system. And it's custom dice. Now, I haven't actually made the custom dice yet, and I've just been, like I said, I've been doing it on PowerPoint. I don't have any physical copies. But the custom dice allowed me to get the different doctrines of the various countries and their change over time and condense it down to a different coloured dice. So, for example, the French have their own blue dice, and those blue dice represent the way that Napoleon and his marshals would fight. It's a chance of losing one of your own pieces, and a piece on this game represents about 60,000 men. So you have a chance of losing an entire corps, but you have a higher chance of getting high numbers like 3 or 2 on that dice. In contrast, the Austrians, Prussians, and Russians, before they go through any military reform, are using a white dice, and that's a 6-sided dice, and the numbers on that are 0, 0, 0, 1, 1, 2. Whereas the French dice, I've got 0, 0, 1, 1, 2, 2, 3, 3, something like that. So the distribution of numbers is higher for the French dice. And then the British use a red dice, which has 0, 0, 1, 1, 2, 2, which is more even and more balanced. It's because it's a professional army that's of higher quality than the Ancien regime armies on the mainland. And then as time goes on, all of those countries can change their military doctrine and acquire another dice, which is a grey dice. It represents the really big armies using massed assault columns and grand batteries of over 100 cannons, massed cavalry charges, and a tolerance for heavy casualties, which you see from about 1809 onwards. So, for example, in the Battle of Wagram and Aspern Essling, after the Austrians had gone through their military reform, they're able to fight battles where they can lose upwards of 100,000 men and still keep fighting. The Russians do a similar thing by the time of 1812 and 1813. Prussians do as well. As do the French. The French learn to fight in this similar way, especially by 1813 when the original Grande Armée had been killed off and they're relying on the Marie-Louise conscripts. So eventually the French will start using these grey dice as well, which have higher numbers on them, but much more chance of killing your own men, killing your own forces. So the battles are basically both sides roll the dice and you choose which colour dice you want to use based on the ones that are available to you.
That's one question. Someone asked how to work the diplomacy in the game because the military, you explain it.
Yeah, so it's basically there's an action economy. You have actions that you have to spend, and one of those actions is diplomacy, and that means selecting one of the diplomacy chits that is currently available. So I'll try and move them over, actually. I'll see if I can get some up on the screen here. So this is going to cover up stuff on the map. I'll show you the diplomacy chits. I'm just going to bring them over here. And then okay, can everyone see those?
It's small. You should make the screen a bit bigger.
Yeah, can I zoom in? Is that working for you?
Just a bit bigger.
No, I'm trying to zoom in. I'll zoom in on this. Can you see those? With Spanish ulcer at the top of the screen?
We see like the screen, but it's a small one.
Okay, hold on.
Okay, now it's getting better.
Yeah, can you see that?
A bit smaller, but it should be...
Okay. Well, basically, all you need to see on these chits are the flags of the different countries and the number on them. So, oops, sorry. So, for example, there might be a couple of chits available that have, say, the Spanish flag with a 2 or a 3 or a 1, and that's how many spaces that country is being shifted on the diplomacy track. So either towards the French or towards the coalition. So when you do a diplomacy action, you're selecting one of those chits that are currently available in a display, and it's going to move that country in one way or the other on the diplomacy track. The other thing you do with the diplomacy action is draw more chits. So there's about 20 chits in the game, and 3 or 4 of them will be available at any one time, and you can select one of those and it will shift one country. Sorry, I'm just going to have to move to a different... Going to go to Eli's room, kids. Yeah, so that's the diplomacy system. So a little bit of randomness because of the chit draw, but still mostly deterministic. And it works all right. It gives you enough variation. I'm just going to put my computer down. Okay. So yeah, that's the diplomacy system based on the chit draws, and you can move in either direction on that diplomacy track. I'll also show you a little bit about 1 Hour World War I. So let me just bring this up. So here's the map for 1 Hour World War I. Can everyone see that, Daniel?
Yeah.
Okay. Yep. Okay. Great. So this map is very similar to the other one for Napoleon. This is World War I, obviously 1914 to 1918. And this is a little bit more similar to 1 Hour World War II, but more emphasis on the reserves, the commitment of reserves, and it's a lot harder to actually take ground because this is the time of trench warfare, so it's very, very hard to actually take ground. And there's more countries fighting in a smaller space. So in this game, there are actually 8 countries that are playable. So you've got the Austrians, you've got the Ottoman Empire, Russia, Germany, France, Italy, the UK, and the USA. And you're fighting on a map that is slightly smaller in terms of the number of spaces as 1 Hour World War II. But if you look at how this map is laid out, it's very clearly divided into separate fronts. So it's very easy to see that there's a western front. You've got Belgium, Burgundy, Paris. You've got the Ruhr, the Germans fighting the British and the French up there on the western front. You've got an eastern front extending from Poland down to, Romania and Ukraine. You can see the Balkans very clearly in the middle there, where the Serbian army starts off, and the Balkans are a key battleground. And then you've got the Middle East and the Italian front. So the Italian front is basically Italy and Alps and Vienna. There's only 3 spaces on the Italian front. The Middle Eastern theatre has got, about 5 spaces that you're fighting over. But it's very clearly broken up into these different fronts. And what you want to try and do in this game is essentially hold firm on 1 or 2 fronts and make a big push on another one while you're building up the efficiency of your combat engine. So while you're upgrading your various tracks. Now, 1 Hour World War I is one of my favourite out of these 3 to play because it's very, very straightforward. I do have an optional rule for diplomacy, which is very similar to the diplomacy chits in 1 Hour Napoleon, so countries can come in and leave. There's rules for the Russian Revolution and US entry. But for the most part, it's quite simple, and you don't have to play with the diplomacy rules. You can play it as a straight-up war game with no diplomacy. It's very deterministic, quite straightforward, and it's just pushing on each front and trying to get that breakthrough, and trying to drain the enemy reserves at the right time so that you can maybe push through and make a breakthrough on one front while they're distracted on another front. And this is heavily inspired by Ted Race's game Paths of Glory, which I'm sure many wargamers here have heard of. I've played a lot of Paths of Glory, and I found that it was very, very good at forcing you to think in terms of holding on one front and pushing on another front. And so you can see 1 Hour World War I is a very, very, very condensed version of Paths of Glory in that sense, that it's got very clear fronts. You're holding on some, pushing on others. So that's the 1 hour series so far. Now, I do have plans to expand it in the future. As Daniel mentioned, I would love to do 1 hour 30 Years War. I also want to do 1 hour American Civil War. And then eventually, if this is successful enough, if it's popular enough, I'd like to eventually do the 7 Years War, maybe even the Crusades, maybe even the Cold War, or futuristic conflicts, maybe a USA versus China or USA versus Russia modern war. But the system is very versatile. It's a very simple system. It's basically based on this action and response, small units, small number of units, small number of spaces on the map, 1 hour playtime, but it's a very robust and versatile system. So I'm really enjoying using it, and I think it's going to be possible to expand it into many, many other conflicts at the strategic level. That's just about everything I wanted to talk about, guys. So, Daniel, I thought, do you want to open it up to questions now?
Absolutely. If someone wants to jump in, just mute out yourself. I mean, you can speak and you can ask any questions. I have some already that I have collected. So if someone has any question, just feel free to say it.
Yep. Yeah, go ahead and jump in.
Oh, if not, one thing I from the playtest I remember, so it's not that you have small actions, it's that you have the possibility of reaction. So you have few, but you have reactions. So basically, you have a bit more than what you may think about.
Yes, that's true. Yeah, so your nation sheet would only show you 4 actions, but yeah, it is the reactions that are big. So if I show you that for 1 hour World War II again, like especially if you look at Germany's nation sheet, you got 4 actions: build, offensive, strategic move, and upgrade. Then you go look at the responses. There's heaps of options for other countries to jump in, both your allies and your enemies. And a lot of time, the strategy in the game is holding on to your action markers, not spending them when it's your turn. You can just pass when it's your turn and keep your action marker, and you can spend it during the enemy's turn. And even just having an action marker, ready to go up your sleeve, can be very effective, because it forces the enemy to think, well, if I do this, what are they going to do in response? And there are some responses that negate other responses as well. So, like, for example, if the USA does an offensive against Japan, they can play the response called Marine Corps, which prevents the Japanese playing their own response called Island Defense. So you can have a response to your own action, and then the enemy can respond to that response. So it basically means you're always on. You're always looking at the board, looking for an opportunity to intervene in the turn structure. It also means that no one can look away from the board for more than a couple of minutes. So you might have 2 minutes of downtime where you're not doing anything, and then you're going to have to respond to something, or the enemy's going to be responding to you. So it means that all the players are pretty much constantly engaged in the game, even if you do it with 5 players. You do it 5 players, you're doing it over 1 hour, and for that 1 hour, basically all of you are engaged in the game. No one's going to be wandering off for 10 minutes and coming back. You need to be watching the board, because anything, to interrupt your turn sequence. So yeah, that's a great point, Daniel, about the responses.
I got a question. So if you can make an example of a combat, just straightforward example.
Yeah, sure. Yep, I can do that. Let me just go down here. There we go. I'll bring up all the units again. So, for example, let's say Germany is attacking the Soviet Union, and let's say the Germans have got a level 2 army, which would be like the picture with the tank on it. Let's say they've got that on the map, and they're attacking a level 1 Soviet army. So, we would go into the battle. The Germans were attacking. They would go, right, I've got a strength of 2. The Soviets have a strength of 1. We would both then add our Air Force bonus. So say the Germans have an Air Force level of 1, they would add 1 to their score. And maybe the Soviets have no Air Force, maybe they get nothing. So at the moment you're looking at 3 to 1. Right? So the level 2 army plus 1 Air Force means 3. The Soviets have 1. Then the Germans would have to decide if they're going to commit reserves to boost their score even higher. But they have to declare that first. The attacker has to declare the reserves they're committing first. So in this example, let's say the Germans don't commit any reserves because it's already 3 to 1. They want to keep their reserves. But let's say the Soviets have 3 reserves on their nation sheet. So not on the map, off map, on the sheet that is in front of the player, in their little reserves box. Maybe they have 3 level 1 armies sitting there. If the Soviets wanted to, they could commit all 3 of those reserves. They would be shifted over to the spent box on the nation sheet, and that would boost their score by 3. So if we start out with a tank level 2 plus Air Force of 1, the Germans having 3, and the Soviets having 1. But if the Soviets commit their 3 reserves, they go up to 4. And then that means they're going to win that battle. Right. So what that means is, because the attacker has to declare their reserves first, it is possible for the defender to lure the attacker into some kind of traps. For example, maybe if in that example the Germans did decide to commit their reserves just to make sure they win, maybe the Germans have committed 2 or 3 of their own reserves, keeping in mind Germany only has a grand total of 9 pieces anyway, so committing 2 or 3 reserves is a huge decision. Let's say the Germans did commit reserves in that battle. The Soviets could simply say, we're committing no reserves, and we're going to lose the battle, 6 to 1, something like that. But it doesn't matter because they've saved their reserves. And what they might then do on their turn is launch a counterattack, knowing that the Germans have exhausted their reserves, and they're going to hit them with all of their reserves coming in fresh, right? And have a chance to win a victory. And this is basically, like, if you think about it like that, it's like what the Soviets were doing in Stalingrad in 1942, right? Allowing the Germans to expend themselves in this battle while they hold onto their reserves, waiting for that big counterattack in early 1943. That's what the game is representing. It's that kind of the decision of the defender of do we just absorb the losses of this attack, let the enemy attack with overwhelming force, and then hit them with a counterattack, or do we feed in reserves now to hold the line and hold our position where it is? And that's what I mean by the decision-making at the combat level. And that's how combat would be
does the defender sum up theirs, the attacker theirs, if they have superiority and if they want to add the reserves?
Yeah,
simple as
that's
that.
it. Simple as that. So you're only adding up numbers that are like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You're very rarely going to have to add up numbers beyond 5, but you still have a big decision to make. And like I said, if Germany only has 9 pieces, Japan only has 5 armies on the map. The UK might have 5 armies on the map. So even committing 1 reserve, like just the number 1, means a lot. That might be 20% of your total force on the whole map. So committing a reserve is still a big decision. So that even though we're dealing with small numbers, it's still a big and meaningful decision. Yeah. So simple combat system, but it works very well. And I encourage other designers to follow something similar. Just adding up numbers. Higher number wins, but then you can commit reserves to boost your score. Very simple system. Yeah, that's a great question.
Because someone was asking also, how is the units making from the spend, reserve, or map? How they work the cycle?
Yeah, so the cycle goes, if a unit's on the map and it is defeated in battle, if it's defeated at a 3 to 1 ratio, that means it's permanently killed. So it's off the map, off the nation sheet entirely. But if it's defeated but not at a 3 to 1 ratio, it just goes into the spent box on the nation sheet. So you have your nation sheet in front of you, it's got spent and reserve. So normally when a unit is defeated, it goes to the spent box. And then when it's your turn, when you do a build action, your build action could be sending units from spent to reserve or from reserve to the map. So a unit is going to cycle between 3 places. It's either going to be on the map, meaning it's on the front line, ready to fight, or it's going to be in spent, meaning the men are still there, but they're not. They've been exhausted from battle, or they're not fully mobilized, or they've expended their ammunition, or whatever. That's the spent box. And then when they're in the reserve box, it means they're behind the front line, waiting to be committed. And of course, you can only commit reserves if you are in supply. That's the main purpose of supply lines in the game. So you have to trace a supply line back to your capital in order to commit reserves in a battle. So essentially, when a unit is defeated, usually it's going to go from the map to spent. And when you do a build action, you can send units from spent to reserve, or you can send units from reserve to the map. And you can upgrade your build track as well. So your build track might start at 2, but you could eventually get it up to 4, meaning you could say send 4 units from spent to reserve, or 4 units from reserve to the map, or you could say have 2 units go spent to reserve, then reserve to map as part of the same build action. So as your economy gets more efficient, you can cycle units more quickly between the map, spent, and reserve. And that represents the efficiency of your wartime economy. So normally when you play as like the USA, you'll be ramping up your build track so that you cycle units through very, very quickly. Yeah, that's basically how it works. But very good question. Yeah, and that is a key part of the game.
If someone has any question, just jump in. We're not going to have any example of your English, so we're just here with the friends. So just ask yourself. Is Chimo here? Is any question, Chimo?
No, can't see anyone.
No, you're shy. I mean, it's 9:30, 9:45. Okay, here we go, Clint. No. Well, so you're from Australia, but Chimo's living in Switzerland. We had people from the US, even from Argentina. So it's a convention.
Okay. Everyone here is Spanish. Okay, so we do have people who are not just in Spain. Okay.
No, because it seems like you said like it's 58 units, and it seems a lot, but you have to divide between all nations, and it's very tense. When from my experience on the playtest, it's very tense. I have few units. How do I send them first or not? I hold on. I wait. I use the diplomacy. The diplomacy change everything I have planned already, and it's very doable solo. It's not, and it's 1 hour. Literally, what you said in the title is a reality.
Yeah, that's right. And that's why if you're going to do it, like bring it onto a convention or something, it's very easy to fit it in at the end of if you spend a whole day playing a bigger game, maybe like your game, the Collapse. But then at the end of that, if you've got an hour free, you can just cram in a game of this. And yes, it is very easy to do solo as well. That's how I play it most of the time. No hidden information.
Perfect, like in between games that you don't know, okay, we have 1 hour or we have 30 minutes. Okay, just play it for a while. So exactly. Someone is typing, but if... Okay, someone is asking, Clint, do you try other combat resolution system for the game that you just discarded?
Yes, but... Okay, so I have. Not for the 1 hour series. The 1 hour series has always been this, either the spent reserve, like committing reserves and just adding up your numbers, or it's been the 1 hour Napoleon with the dice rolling. I have tried combat systems based on chit pull, so pulling a chit out of a bag or out of a cup, and the chits have different combat results on them. I tried that because I was inspired by a design by Herbert Butterfield, I think called, was it Ardennes 44 or something to do with the Battle of the Bulge. But there was a chit pull system that I experimented with some of my other games, but I found it to be a little bit too fiddly and a little bit too hard to balance, so I stopped doing that. And now most of my designs basically follow either just dice rolling, like 1 hour Napoleon. It's just custom dice. Actually, I prefer custom dice, where you can change the outcome on each dice face. Or I just have this deterministic adding up the numbers and committing reserves. Now, having said that, I'm working on some other designs now that are totally different, that are barely even war games. So a lot of what I'm thinking about right now, for example, my game on Poland and the Polish insurgency, it's not really a war game in the traditional sense. It's more like almost like a Euro game. So I am sort of heading away from dice and charts and combat resolution tables and stuff like that. Yeah.
Yeah. So if someone says fast system doesn't get too much time in game, that's it.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I mean it's a lot of games. If your game has a combat resolution system that takes 5 minutes per battle to resolve, that's going to be way too long. It's ideally, if you're going to have a game where you might be fighting 10 or 20 battles, they should really be resolved in a matter of seconds. 10 seconds, 15 seconds to resolve a battle, because it just slows down the game too much, especially if it's a multiplayer game. This is a big insight that I learned from Cole Whirl, who designed Root and Pax Pamir and now Arcs and Oath, a few other games. He works with Leader Games. So Cole, he said when he was working on the design of Root, because it's a 4-player game, he wanted the combat system to be resolved in a couple of seconds. Because if you have 4 people sitting around the table and 2 of them are fighting a battle, if that battle even goes for a couple of minutes, everyone else loses interest because they're not directly involved in it. So he's like, the battle is just roll 2 dice. That's it. And I think that's very good advice. If it's a multiplayer game, you need to have quick battles because usually a battle's only between 2 players, if the other players are not involved. Now, that's different if you have just a 2-player game. If it's just one-on-one, you can have your combat system be as complicated as you like because both players are going to be invested in it the whole time. So, for example, probably my favorite combat system is the one used by Columbia Games in a couple of their games. One's called just Napoleon. It's about the Waterloo campaign in 1815. And the other one is Bobby Lee, which is about the American Civil War in the Eastern Theatre. And that's just both of those are 2-player games. They're block games. You have upright blocks that rotate when you take losses. And when you fight a battle in those games, you take the blocks off the main map, and they go to a little battle board where you've got reserve, center, left flank, right flank, and you fight a little battle on a battle board, which is very cool. But it can take 5 minutes, maybe it can even take 10 minutes if you've got a big battle. That can only work in a 2-player game. If you had to translate that system over to a game with 4, 5, or 6 players, it's going to slow down the game way too much. So yeah, when you're deciding on a combat system, if you're doing a multiplayer game, I think your battles have to go very, very quickly. Resolve them in a couple of seconds. And like I said, I prefer to still have some decision making even within those battles. So they're not just dice rolling. They should have some kind of decision for the players to make. Yeah, that's a good question though.
So if someone has any more questions, I would say like the game, like the one that was released, the 1 hour World War II, it's not easy to find. So I just find it available in a shop. It's called $4 in Barcelona. So I know that they are preserving. I'm not making any marketing or anything, but it's the only one I could find. So if I know more options, I would say it. So, but you can have a look on that.
They're not a big publisher. Worthington's not a big publisher. They're based in the US. Most of their customers are in the USA, so not a huge distribution in Europe. But who knows? Well, who knows where it goes? We've only done 1 print run. I'm hoping to do more of them. I can see a question just popped up there. Availability date for those games. So 1 Hour World War II is available right now. You can order it from Worthington Games. The other 2 are not released yet. So 1 Hour Napoleon and 1 Hour World War I. The plan for those is I'm going to launch a Kickstarter for those early in 2025, maybe January or February 2025, through Worthington Games. Again, they're still going to be the publisher. And we're going to release them both on one Kickstarter, where people can back one or the other, or they can back both of them. And then hopefully I think it will launch. I think we'll get to our funding goal and get them into production. But Worthington are very quick. They launched that game, 1 Hour World War II. I think we had a Kickstarter for it in June this year, 2024. And by November, they had it printed, produced, and were shipping out to backers. So I got my copies in November, and the Kickstarter was in June. So that's a very quick turnaround compared to a lot of other publishers. I just saw another question pop up in the chat about print and play options. And yes, there will be. So, especially for those of you who follow me on Twitter, I've put out several calls already for playtesters and I send them the files to do print and play. Very easy to do print and play with these games because there's not that much to them. You've got to print maybe an A4 size map, maybe 1 A4 paper sheet of counters, a couple of pages for the nation sheets, but it's basically you can print it all on A4 if you've got a color printer. Very easy to do as a print and play option. So yes, if anyone wants to follow me on Twitter and ask about print and play, you can definitely do that. Happy to send anyone the files if they want it. And always happy for more playtesters. I'm always happy. Even if I can get playtesters to send me one little comment or if they find one typo in the game, that is totally worth it. If they go through my rulebook and find one mistake to fix up, totally worth it. Because I can read the same rules over and over again and miss lots of things, As anyone who's a game designer will be able to tell you. So yeah, I always need playtesters and happy to give out the print and play files to anyone that wants to use them.
Okay, so besides the question here, we have a WhatsApp group, and I had one question. Like Worthington, when they make the Kickstarter, usually they don't follow the EU-friendly option, so it's something that they can consider
Yes,
for the
I have
upcoming
mentioned it.
Kickstarters. So if they,
Yeah.
I mean, because someone asked, if not, it's going to be very hard for the European.
I know. It's unfortunately not something I have much control over because I'm just a designer, but I will encourage them to try and get some more European distribution. Hopefully we can do that. Yeah, they do have some.
Yeah, if the Kickstarter, they can have also the EU-friendly option, so the shipping and the VAT is added.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, but unfortunately, that's not something I have much of a say over. But yes, like I said, yeah, if you want to play it, print and play is always an option. Yeah.
So any more questions? Someone jump in. I mean, we're not gonna question the English. Or if you want to do it in Spanish and I translate it in English, so it's fine.
Yeah, that's fine. I mean, I've got to go in about 5 minutes anyway, but yeah, we've got time for a couple more questions if anyone wants to ask any.
If not, just feel free to follow Clint Warren-Davey on Twitter, on X.
Yes,
if you have any question, comment during the chat, you can ask later. Right. You can contact me. I will put you in contact. So it's very easy to find us.
Yeah. I'm on Twitter a lot. I check my emails a lot as well. So if anyone wants to reach out, we have lots of people coming and going.
We have a bunch of 50 people. I mean, at the chat at the moment. I could check it. So people get up late, but they join in.
Up late, yeah.
That's
it's 10 o'clock in the morning for you guys. Not that late.
Yeah. Oh, well, so if no one is asking anything, so I would just to thank you, Clint, in behalf of Sergio and the organization. So when they asked me to present it, it's so much fun. And I really thank you for all your help with the class development. But I encourage everyone to follow Clint, to follow the games. And that is, as he says, it's so versatile, the system. So if you like World War I, there's going to be an option. World War II, Napoleon, 30 Years War, who knows?
Eventually,
I will push on that. So in 1 hour, it's easy to get a game to play. So I really thank you for the presentation, for the time. And we keep going on the online convention. So just join us if you can later on. And you're going to have a lot of fun.
I've got to go get the kids now. But yes, thank you for everyone that's joined in on the chat. Thank you for the questions. Thanks everyone for listening. And yeah, follow me on Twitter. Order the games through Worthington Games if you are interested, and there will be sure to be many more coming out in the future. It's 8 o'clock p.m. now here in Australia, so I'll have to go. Daniel, thank you for hosting. I'm going to jump out now, but I'm sure I'll see you guys again sometime soon. All right. Adios. Out.
Hello. Good night.